John Light, President, Founder of Sabretooth Recruiting, and today I'm talking with the Managing Partner of SpaceFund, a VC really dedicated to how we make space exploration more profitable, more useful to those of us stuck living here on Earth. Meagan Crawford. Meagan, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, John.
Well, I'm hoping, Meagan, that as we get this rolling, that you could give us maybe that 90-second overview of you and your backstory and SpaceFund and where you guys are today, because I know you have some really exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, so the quick version is I started my career at NASA at the Tech Transfer Office at Johnson Space Center as an intern while I was getting my master's in business at Rice. And I had a front row seat. At this time, this was when SpaceX was still blowing up rockets. They hadn't launched any yet. And I got this front row seat to the technology being transferred out of NASA and into SpaceX, the kind of the first space startup company that was really going to change the way humanity interacted with space. And I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked from that moment on. I said, this is where I'm going to spend my career, is in making this, what we call new space, a reality.
Right.
And after that, I worked at a couple of startups. I built and sold a space startup myself. And throughout that journey, coached a lot of startups as well. The biggest problem was a lack of access to capital. There weren't any venture funds that were dedicated to this industry, that knew how to do the technical due diligence or the market projections. That was sorely missing from the industry. So how are any of these companies going to grow without that fuel of the venture capital to get them to orbit? And so that's why we founded SpaceFund, was to kind of fill that gap. And one of the things that we found is our ability to lead rounds, to do that due diligence, to create an assessment of that company, then helps other investors feel more comfortable about participating in those rounds. So we kind of leverage our expertise to double, triple, quadruple the amount of funding that these companies are getting beyond just the check that we're writing. Right. So that's the kind of niche that we've carved out for ourselves, is really being that supportive venture capital firm for the space startups, so that those space CEOs can go actually build their business and not be worried about fundraising all the time.
And you guys, as VC firms go, there was a generation of VC firms that started over the past 5 years or so. And I think you guys, if I remember correctly, are around 6 years old. So you're kind of part of that. And so you've seen a market that's been in rapid transition, I have no doubt, in that time. But I know that, and if you don't mind me sharing, I know you've got a successful exit in the books, and you have another one pending, which is super exciting. I mean, when you look at the horizon, so when you think space exploration, you never think next year, right? You always think there's a horizon that's 10 years, 20 years down the road. And so for you guys to be turning around exits in year 4, 5, 6, whenever the first one happened, and then the one you've got going on now, that's pretty exciting in my book, because it's not easy.
It's not easy. And you're right. Most people looking at space as an investment sector, they kind of have an immediate gut reaction. They say, it's too rich for my blood. It's too expensive to do space projects. And it takes too long to fit into a traditional investment window.
Yeah.
And so we spent the first year as SpaceFund trying to figure out how to communicate to potential investors that those are misconceptions, in fact.
Right.
So we actually went out and did the research and found that and this was in 2018. I'm sure this number has come down since then. I should probably update the research. But at that time, the average age at exit was 7 years for a space startup company. And so it's like, okay, that does fit perfectly into a venture capital timeline. And as the cost of launch have come down, exponentially over the last 10 years because of SpaceX, that's the great enabler. Now we're seeing space companies that can do things for single-digit millions instead of hundreds of millions, the way it used to be. And then the other factor to this is Jeff Bezos was famously quoted as having said, the problem with space startups is that 2 kids in a dorm room can't start a space company. Well, I'm proud to say that I have a portfolio company that was literally 2 guys in a garage in Silicon Valley, using hardware that they bought from Home Depot, sent their first successful experiment to space. 2 guys in a garage in Silicon Valley.
No kidding.
And on the back of that successful experiment, they were able to go fundraise for what is now a very, very big and very exciting company. So, so it's completely changed. The space industry has completely changed. It is incredibly investable, and I like to say that it is the only investment sector with truly unlimited upside potential. Space is not limited by resources, energy, or real estate. And I don't know of a single other investment sector that isn't limited by one or all of those factors.
You know, and so much of it too happens kind of behind the scenes, if you will. I have a prior guest on a podcast who's a brilliant guy, probably as close to a polymath as you'll know in life. There's very few of those around, right? But he married very highly too. His wife is not a rocket scientist. She's a nuclear rocket scientist working on the Mars shot. And I mean, if you want to, what trumps a rocket scientist? I guess a nuclear rocket scientist is going up the ladder. There's a lot of brilliant people, but you don't hear tons of their accomplishments in the news or out in the media. I mean, you see it, but it's not necessarily the same as I have an app on my phone telling me how to invest my dollars, or an app on my phone managing subscriptions, or how to have a healthier lifestyle, or so on and so forth. You know, but the impact, you know, I go back and maybe it's just because of my vintage, my age. We don't need to talk about age right here too much, but I remember, you know, Velcro came out of the space program. You know, freeze-dried foods, like we've all had that freeze-dried ice cream, which is, you know, kids think it's a treat, crazy, but whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of things that came out, but it was very government-driven. With SpaceX on the scene blowing things up, it's like you said, it's now a great place for private dollars to flow to. I'm curious to hear, though, because I see on one side you have this big problem to solve, which is for the entrepreneurs, the people who have ideas and are innovators. How does that apply on the flip side? You know, because investors, smart investors, are always looking to manage their money, their portfolios in such a way that they're going to maximize returns, but they're also going to de-risk the downside.
That's exactly it, right? And so risk reward, right? You're constantly, as an asset manager, considering, you know, how do we hedge and diversify, right? And that is something that space is uniquely capable of doing. So over the last 20 years, the space industry has not had a single year of negative growth. Not one over the last 20 years, even during COVID, okay? That's phenomenal. There's very few industries that can say that in this sort of volatile market environment that we've had over the last 20 years. And so, so that's really important. We've also found, and we published a paper about this, that the space industry is not correlated to any other investment sector. So it's not correlated to real estate. It's not correlated to Bitcoin. It's not correlated to the public markets. It's not correlated to gold. It's not correlated to oil and gas. It wasn't correlated to any industry that we tested. The closest thing approximating a correlation was a medium level correlation, about 0.5%, negative correlation with the public markets. Meaning, and the public markets have had a lot of volatility, so space industry seems to provide that kind of realistic, you know, that both sides of that hedging and diversification. Yeah. And so I think that's something that makes it very unique from a finance perspective, from an investment perspective, is that when you run the numbers on it, it starts to look really, really interesting. Even beyond the fact that space is exciting and inspiring, and people love to talk about it and to be involved in it, but when you're managing a portfolio of assets, it's got to be a different conversation than space is cool, right? Right.
No, absolutely. So, okay, I have a question bubble up in my head here. So we talk about innovation, we talk about finance and getting innovators funded with ideas that could resonate, that make sense. How is AI impacting that? And let me give it some context, you know, because when people talk about AI, I think 98% of the people who talk about it probably don't know what they're talking about. You know, they say AI like it's this Skynet is coming, when AI has a lot of subsets. It's been around, man, as long as rocket engines practically. You know, it was theorized about in the 40s and 50s, and it's only been recently that we could really bring a lot of it to reality as far as generative AI and agentic AI. But we've had ML, machine learning, for a long time. I'm really curious to know, and you may or may not be able in a position to share this relative to your portfolio companies and things that you have going on, but I'm curious if there is an example that you could point to, even if it's kind of generic, but that you've seen the SpaceFund's been involved in, where AI is helping your innovators, your portcos, have leaps and bounds in terms of their getting their innovations to something that's commercializable, I should say.
Yeah, we have one portfolio company called Cognitive Space that has for years been using AI and machine learning for two very important things. One is managing constellations of satellites. So you're talking about dozens, if not hundreds of satellites whirling around the Earth at thousands of miles an hour. AI is much better at managing that than having a human try and actually figure out where
no, because
going,
we'd be trying to play, crash derbies,
Yeah, exactly. But then on the other side of it, what are those satellites doing? Most of them are Earth observation satellites, remote sensing. They're gathering data about the Earth. So then being able to manage the processing and value add that makes that data sellable. AI is amazingly good at that. We have another company called Abruda that is using AI and machine learning to help satellites dock to each other. This is what we call rendezvous, proximity operations, and docking, or RPOD. That would be really, really hard. Again, objects flying at thousands of miles an hour. If you had two humans controlling each one of them, what are the chances? And also, you don't have immediate communication from space. So how do you perform that maneuver manually? No, you need AI on board those satellite systems to enable that docking to happen. And that's critical for refueling on orbit, for transferring data and assets on orbit. So anyway, there's a lot of pieces of the space industry where AI has been absolutely transformative and given us the new capabilities in the industry.
Okay, got another question. We talked about and the need for investors and people to recognize what a healthy opportunity it is. The need innovators for the support, not just in capital but networks and counsel and guidance. But what would you say is probably the biggest problem facing that industry sector today?
So aside from funding, I sit on the board of several of our portfolio companies, and it's always funding is always the number one problem. But outside of that, and you'll like this, John, based on your background, aside from that, it's hiring.
Yeah.
And it's not about hiring rocket scientists and engineers, as people might think. It's hiring for all the other roles. As you alluded to earlier, space has a PR program, PR problem. People don't know what's going on. They don't know that this industry is as robust as it is. Most people don't know. I'm tracking 4,000 space startup companies around the world right now. Those 4, are just the ones that I know about. And they all need HR and marketing and CFOs and accountants. They need all the same roles that any other business needs. But your average accountant probably isn't going to think, I could go get a job in the space industry, right? It's not even on their radar as a place to go look for jobs. And so we have a big hiring problem in the space industry, as well as a funding and PR problem.
Okay, well, I'm not going to sit here and physically lick my chops, but it's getting pretty close. Let me ask you this, Meagan, because we've covered a lot of territory in a short time. And number one, I got to give credit to you for that, because you are a veteran of the podcast world with your podcast, right? You still have ongoing, Mission Eve. And I would assume that it's available on Spotify and Apple and Google Play and all those places. So if people want more, they can catch you there. But what if somebody wanted to talk directly and explore opportunities with SpaceFund, investing, or whatever it might be? What's the best way for folks to find you?
So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. I don't want to be a part of the space marketing problem, right? So it's very easy. It's spacefund.com. And on that website, you'll find the paper I was talking about that we published about the lack of correlation, the data about the exits. We make all of that publicly available because we want to invite more investors to participate in this industry, whether that's through the private markets, making direct investments in startups, investing in SpaceFund, or even through the public markets. We're seeing a lot more activity as these companies are growing up a little bit, a lot more of these space companies on the public markets as well. And so we want everybody to learn as much as they can, be as informed as possible. So please go to the website, learn some things about the space industry, and there's an option to reach out to me there.
Awesome. Meagan Crawford, managing partner, spacefund.com. I think we could keep going, but I know we have our time limit, so we're going to have to figure out how to do this again. But thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.